Welcome to the Plant-Based Coaches Podcast. I'm Rich and joined here today with Dr. Suzanne Fox.
Hey, everybody.
We're honored to have Dr. Alan Goldhamer. Dr. Goldhamer is a pioneering physician and co-founder of TrueNorth Health Center, where he specializes in medically supervised water-only fasting and plant-based nutrition. He has helped thousands of patients improve their health through fasting, lifestyle changes, and evidence-based approaches to reversing chronic disease. Welcome, Dr. Goldhamer.
I'm glad to be here.
So our first question is, a lot of our audience is either transitioning to a whole food plant-based diet or they're learning about the benefits. Do you think fasting would benefit them as they make the transition?
Well, today, most people, regardless of their diet and lifestyle choices, the conditions that they're most vulnerable to are diseases of dietary excess. It's overweight, it's high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune diseases, and cancer. These conditions aren't deficiency diseases, so they're not going to be solved by pills and potions and powders and treatments. They have to be solved by getting rid of the reason why people develop them, and that's the dietary excess that makes them fat, that gives them the visceral fat, that produces the inflammation that causes them. And so it's not surprising that when you have disease of dietary excess, correcting the diet is helpful, exercise is helpful, and fasting also can be helpful, whether it's intermittent fasting that people do every day by limiting their feeding window to 8 hours or so, or whether it's the occasional medically supervised fasting where they go for longer periods of time, up to, in our clinic, 40 days. It makes sense that those interventions may be useful at reversing the consequences of dietary excess.
I often hear about dry fasting. I don't really know much about it, but I think you're not in favor of it, and I wonder if you can tell our audience.
Well, yeah, in my opinion, dry fasting is not physiologically sound because when you're detoxifying the body's mobilizing materials, it has to have a solute in order to eliminate the material from the body. Otherwise, what happens with dry fasting eventually leads to dehydration, and then you end up with kidney shutdown or damage. And, witness the fact that, you've seen some fatalities in people that have taken dry fasting to an extreme. So, we don't recommend dry fasting because we want to see the body be able to eliminate the material that's working so hard at mobilizing. And so, although there may be a hormetic response that have some beneficial effect, in the long run, what we advocate is fasting where you continue to get adequate hydration with water.
How do you?
When you think about how does toxins get out of the body, most of the products that are eliminated from the body are eliminated when the blood is purified by the kidneys and eliminated in the urine. If you do not have adequate fluid intake, you get hyperconcentrated urine, you end up with resulting kidney damage and the inability to effectively detox. So we wouldn't really recommend that as a health promoting intervention.
How do you judge how much water somebody should drink, especially during a fast?
Yeah, so what we do is twofold. Number one is we're monitoring their urine and looking at specific gravity and making sure that they're not overly concentrating. In other words, they're maintaining adequate hydration, but you're also doing a physical exam twice a day. So you're monitoring pulse volume and blood pressure, and you're doing blood tests and urine tests in order to make sure that kidney function is adequate, liver function is adequate, and that the body is able to maintain a homeostatic balance. That's one of the reasons why it's so important, though, that when we talk about fasting, particularly long-term water-only fasting, that you realize not everybody's a candidate for long-term water-only fasting. The way you determine that is by medical history, physical exam, and laboratory testing. And that even if a person is a good candidate, they have to fast properly. That means they need to rest, they need to maintain hydration, and most importantly, they have to terminate their fast with refeeding properly. And it takes about half the length of a fast to properly refeed after fasting. So a person that has a 20-day water fast will need probably 10 days of programmatic refeeding in order to be able to make sure they avoid refeeding syndrome or post-fasting edema, etc. So fasting should be taken seriously because it's a serious intervention.
Yeah, definitely. This is it.
Yeah, that is just so fascinating to me. Do you have a lot of trouble with people not being able to complete the program just because they're just unable to tolerate it? Is that something that happens frequently?
No. And the reason for that is that before we undertake fasting, we've reviewed a patient's medical history. We've looked at their laboratory evaluation. They're in a controlled setting. They're being examined twice a day. And as a consequence, people are able to successfully fast. We've done this for 40 years. We've had 25,000 people go through fasting at the TrueNorth Health Center. But, we only take people that we expect to have a good outcome, that are a good candidate, and that are going to be monitored properly. So if you just walk, along and randomly selected people, certainly a lot of people would not be a good candidate for fasting. For example, anybody that's on medication that they can't be appropriately weaned off of isn't going to be fasting. You're not going to fast on most medications because they're going to be potentiated and cause potential damage. You're not going to fast people that don't have adequate liver or kidney function in order to be able to adapt to the fasting state. You're not going to fast people, for example, type 1 diabetics that don't produce enough insulin and be able to adapt to fasting. And you're not going to fast people that don't have the ability to, take time out, get the rest, and get the support they need in order to be able to do it successfully. There's a reason why we've had 25,000 people successfully fast, is because these are highly self-selected, highly motivated people willing to do what it takes to actually be successful with it.
Yeah. Wow. How long does the average patient fast at your clinic?
Well, it ranges from 5 to 40 days on water only, but the average fasts are in the 2 to 3 week range. Healthier people may only be fasting 5 to 10 days, preventatively. And we've completed a study recently that showed that as beneficial as fasting can be in sick people, people who have high blood pressure, diabetes, or overweight, proportionally, the people that get the biggest changes in terms of cardiometabolic risk factors and other objective measures are actually healthy people. It turns out it's more effective to prevent disease than wait till people are sick and then try to undo it. So sick people do get benefit of fasting. We see that every day. But I think that it will ultimately realize that the people that get the most benefit are the shorter fast and healthy people that are doing it before they get sick instead of waiting till afterwards.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you think there's any benefit to people who do these? I heard you talking about the intermittent fasting where they have like a 6 to 8 hour window per day.
That's what I do personally.
Well, we've been advocating intermittent feeding for 40 years. And basically the rule is don't eat 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed at night. And that's going to give you a 12-hour fast every day, day after day after week after month. Cumulatively, there can be potential benefits. And then if you're trying to lose weight, some people will choose to extend that fasting period another 3 or 4 hours in the morning so they've had a chance to exercise, etc. first. And that could give them up to 16 hours of fasting every day. And so the idea is to eat over an 8-hour window, or if you have a higher caloric needs, or it might be a 12-hour window, but not to be eating all day and all night long. And sometimes, again, the biggest rule is don't eat 3 to 4 hours before you go to sleep. You'll increase your sleep quality. It'll tend to avoid the eating at night, which tends to accumulate calories that are turned into fat rather than burned. And a lot of times people are eating at night not because they're hungry, but because they're tired, frustrated, angry, or fatigued.
It's emotional.
And that's not a good reason to eat. You feel better because there's a stimulatory effect, a drug-like effect from it, but you don't want to be, you should be eating when you're hungry, not when you're upset or angry or fatigued.
Yeah, very true. I have a two-part question. My dad, a few years ago, he was diagnosed with giant cell arteritis. And I always wondered if fasting would help him, because what he ended up doing was taking an infusion, which had a lot of dangerous side effects. And then he ended up getting stage 4 osteoarthritis after that. And I'm wondering if that inflammation, turned into osteoarthritis afterwards.
Well, like all autoimmune diseases, these are diseases where it's the body's immune system that's attacking itself. And that can be caused by many factors. One of the most common is thought to be gut leakage, where a chronic inflamed gut allows proteins to be absorbed into the body that stimulates the immune system, and depending on the genetics of the individual will depend on which tissue gets attacked. It could be the intestinal tract, we call it colitis and Crohn's disease, could be the joints in osteo and rheumatoid arthritis, could be the kidneys and systemic lupus erythematosus, asthma, eczema, psoriasis. These conditions all, interestingly enough, respond to fasting. And there may be a number of reasons why people that use fasting are able to overcome these conditions. One may be healing the leaky gut. So the inflammation goes down. We know acute phase reactive proteins and all measures of inflammation tend to go down after a period of fasting. Interesting enough, during fasting, inflammatory markers actually go up. as a part of the body's attempt to heal itself. But then when the healing is successful, inflammation is able to come down. And so the net effect is reduction in inflammation. There's also a detoxifying effect where people mobilize and eliminate those accumulated intermediary products of metabolism and toxic exogenous products. And that may be one of the benefits of fasting. The other is just getting rid of the dietary antigens and other factors that tend to be aggravating the problem to begin with, not to mention enforcing a period of rest. So I don't know whether your particular father would have responded or not, but that's a condition that we've seen numerous times and consistently respond. So depending on what else is going on with them, certainly might have been worth a consideration.
Right.
But also, you should have bought Apple stock when it was $1 a share. What were you thinking? You'd be a billionaire today. Come on.
Yeah, right. I wish I did.
Yeah. Hindsight is always, so great.
And my other question is, because I've tried to push him toward a whole food plant-based diet, and of course, if you're not if you're not willing, you're not going to do it. But he has some, with good reason, fears about fasting, and my whole family did, because unfortunately my sister passed of anorexia. What is it, 13 years ago now? And I know there's benefits to fasting, but it really is an emotional disease, and major depression, I think all of that is involved with it. And I think that fasting gets a bad rep, especially in families when they have eating disorder.
Anorexia nervosa is a neurological disease, and certainly fasting is not a treatment for anorexia nervosa.
Right, and I think that's what they're fearing.
Anorexia patients, but in fast, the desire, the lack of desire to eat, etc., has really nothing to do with fasting. It has to do with anorexia nervosa, which is a very specific and very debilitating, very difficult to treat condition.
Right.
But fasting doesn't cause anorexia nervosa. Anorexia nervosa results in people having a misperceived image of their body and adapting all kinds of maladaptive behaviors. Only one of which happens to be the undernutrition. So the idea that if somebody goes on a fast, that will make them anorexia, of course, is complete nonsense.
Right. I agree. And Suzanne?
Yeah, I know when I've done any type of fasting in the past, I am very happy to get back to regular eating. So I can't imagine pushing that any longer than I feel is absolutely necessary. I was diagnosed with lupus, and I had to kind of put myself on a little bit of a fasting thing. And I did notice, like you were talking about, that the symptoms did increase while I was in a fasted state, but then they began to decrease, and I started to just go back to my normal diet, and it has helped a lot. So that is a very important part of getting rid of autoimmune. Well,
lupus is a condition that does respond well. But besides fasting, you also have to adopt a whole plant food diet, and you have to be willing to get enough sleep and exercise. So these are pretty radical interventions for many people. You have to actually get healthy to stay healthy in lupus. There's an interesting book out called The Lupus Recovery Diet. It was Jill Harrington's book, and she tracked down a bunch of people from around the country that had long-term remission in lupus. And interestingly enough, about a dozen of them were patients of ours. Others were patients of Dr. Joel Furman, who also utilizes fasting and a whole plant food diet. So the conventional treatment of this disease where your immune system is attacking yourself is to suppress your immune system with steroids. The problem is, it turns out you need your immune system. And when you do long-term suppression with steroids, the treatment ends up being worse in some cases than the disease itself. It's not a good long-term strategy. And so this is a very different way of approaching it. But it's significantly more work than just taking a pill, because you have to control diet, sleep, exercise, and even stress management. And so that's beyond what most people are interested in addressing. Really, they just want to take a pill and go along and continue to engage in short-term pleasure-seeking, self-indulgent behavior. And most doctors have no experience of people actually getting well. I always remember I was in Texas, and I gave a talk to a medical group with a large number of physicians that were diabetologists that specialize in treating diabetes, and I talked about our outcome data and people getting well. And one of the doctors most of them were overweight. They were serving them pulled pork sandwiches and chocolate cake. And, there was like nothing to eat at this luncheon, except there were some bell peppers that were carved into flowers, and they were delicious. But other than that, there was no. But afterwards, a gentleman who was a physician, who was about 75 pounds at least overweight, came up to me and he said, I've been treating diabetics for 25 years. I've never seen one get well. He said, maybe I should do this diet stuff myself.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, this guy's been treating diabetics for 25 years, and he's telling me he's never had a single patient get well. After a while, don't they ask, maybe it's me? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, the conventional wisdom is, you just put them on some metformin, and when the metformin stops working, you start, with the CGM, and then you just keep on adding insulin bit by bit until there's nothing left. That's the typical diabetic treatment.
And
that's one way to do it.
Yeah, she was on metformin for years, my mom, and I had her switch to a whole food plant-based diet, and it just went away. She's not on any meds today. And
oh, what a coincidence! Who knew? Jeez,
it works.
Imagine that.
I was told.
What's interesting is, it's like saying, well, I had a person that was overweight and we restricted their calories by eating a whole plant food diet, and they lost weight. And it's like, what do you mean they lost weight? Nobody ever loses weight. Do you understand that the chance of, if you go to a doctor and ask him to help you lose 5% of your body weight and keep it off for a year, there's a 95% failure rate. It's higher than heroin
addiction. That's what my doctor told me, Yeah,
it's the likelihood of a person losing weight. And the reason is this: when you have a drug addict or an alcoholic, you tell them the truth. You say, "Oh, you're sensitive to those chemicals. You can't control it. You need to stop drinking completely."
Yeah.
You don't say, "Well, just drink beer and wine and you'll be fine." Yeah. Put your alcohol in a smaller cup. You won't be a drink anymore. Drink your alcohol with a spoon, and then put your spoon down between each slurp, and you won't overdrink anymore. We don't say that because we know there's a 99% failure rate. Yeah. But if what we tell alcoholics is you have to stop drinking completely. Mm-hmm. No alcohol. And if they do that, they win. But what we tell overweight people is, well, just keep eating the same chemicals that are fooling the satiety mechanisms in your brain, and just eat less and you won't be overweight anymore. Or put your food on a smaller plate. Put your fork down between each. We lie to them and we tell them, you keep eating the same food, but just try to figure out how to not eat as much of it. Instead of telling them the truth. You're overweight because you're fooling the satiety mechanisms in your brain with chemicals added to your feed, and those chemicals are salt, oil, and sugar. Salt, oil, and sugar are not food. They're hyperconcentrated components of food added back to food to stimulate dopamine, the neurochemical associated with pleasure, in your brain. And so when you take those chemicals out, you eliminate the fooling of the satiety mechanisms, and people start losing weight. If they're a female, it's about 2 pounds a week. If they're a male, it's about 3 pounds a week. Males will lose 50% more weight on average just because they're full of testosterone, which is a fat-burning hormone. You might say, well, why don't we just inject women with testosterone? Because they would lose fat. The problem is they'd get hairy and get cancer and die, so it's not a good strategy. But in fact, the other thing's true. If you inject men with the female hormone estrogen, they grow breasts and get hips and gain fat. So these differences between men and women are biological, not psychological. And so the reality is that healthy women are going to maintain a higher percent body fat. It's going to be easier for them to gain weight on everything else being equal than males because they're designed to survive a period of biological vulnerability called pregnancy. There are real big differences between males and females, regardless of, what we want to talk about. And those differences mean if a woman's trying to lose weight, she's going to have to work harder than an equivalent male is, just because of the biological, differences that are in there. So anyway, we need to stop lying to overweight people. We need to tell them the truth. They're not able to eat these chemicals that fool their brain, so they need to stop eating the chemicals. Adopt a whole plant food SOS-free diet. And guess what? They lose weight down to their optimum weight. We see it every single day. There's no exceptions. Everybody loses weight progressively when they adopt a health-promoting diet.
Yep, exactly. You made me think of a flashback of when I first started losing weight. This woman at a local Y, she said to me, she's so jealous of men. They're able to lose weight so much faster than women. She was like resentful about it. It is what it is. But I have another question. You're familiar with
not just weight loss. Women have to work hard for just about everything else, too. Ask any woman, they'll tell you.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I am. It's true.
That's why I say, well, get used to it. What are we going to do about it? We don't make the rules up.
It's okay. We're used to it. We work hard.
I have a question. You're familiar with Dr. Brooke Goldhamer, right? And her work with hypernourishment. Because I know Dr. Furman, he doesn't really agree with over nourishing your body with especially excessive amounts of flax seeds. Again, this is a two-part question. I'm wondering your thoughts about supplementing with DHA and EPA, because I do supplement with the algae-based one that Dr. Furman sells. I worry about brain health. But I know you can't get enough through flax. So it's really a two-part question. What do you think about hypernourishment?
I wouldn't assume that you're not going to get enough essential fatty acids from a whole plant food diet. There may be people, for example, that are intolerant to using more concentrated sources like nuts and seeds, or people that, for whatever reason, have food triggers and they eliminate classes of foods that may want to resort to supplementation of algae-based DHA. Or for whatever reason, if you're not maintaining, if you don't absorb well, there's some other issue that you're not maintaining healthy levels of essential fatty acids. I don't have any problem with using an algae-based supplement if it's appropriate.
Yeah.
But the assumption that you can't get enough from a whole plant food diet, rich in greens, flax, walnuts, etc., I think is yet to be actually demonstrated as accurate. So there may be people that do need to supplement because of various reasons, but as a general rule, we don't recommend the supplementation of DHA across the board unless there's some test or reason clinically to justify it. What we do recommend routinely supplementing is vitamin B12 in vegans.
Oh, yeah.
Because B12 only comes from bacteria, and vegetarians are not getting the same level of bacterial contamination that people living on a dead, decaying flesh diet are, they're going to need to supplement B12 in order to ensure adequate levels. It might take years or even decades to deplete it, but you will eventually deplete B12 status without some source of exogenous supplementation on a diet where you're hyperhygienic about washing and peeling because you don't want worms and parasites and all kinds of other things. We also recommend people that don't get outside enough to form enough vitamin D, supplement vitamin D. So a significant percentage of particularly women in our society are D deficient. It contributes to osteoporosis, increased risk for cancer and chronic pain. So those are two that we do routinely see people supplementing. But DHA would be, we would supplement if it was clinically indicated, but we wouldn't recommend routine supplementation of that.
Yeah, because what I did was did the Omega Quant test. Dr. Furman told me check it every 6 months for a while. And it was low. It was like, I remember 3 maybe. And I did get it above 5 finally. It took a long time. So, I was eating what I could think is a clean, whole food, plant-based diet, and I still couldn't get it up.
So there has been a little bit of debate about what normal means, both in terms of vitamin D as well as DHA, and that's a legitimate debate out there. But if you're using an objective measure that you feel comfortable with, that's the first assumption, then and you're doing the diet, we would also take a look at, are people getting the absorption that they need? Because that can be affected by mechanical factors, even how well you chew your food, et cetera, et cetera. Some foods are antagonistic or inhibitory. Like, for example, if you're eating high amounts of omega-6 fatty acid, it'll increase your proportional amount of D. So there's a lot of little individual variables in there. What I can tell you is that in our practice, there are people that you can justify supplementation of DHA for. It doesn't turn out to be a routine level, though. So it's not the same as we would treat, say, B12 or something.
I see. And do you use the Omega Quant test or something similar in your clinic?
There's a number of tests out there. We're still actually trying to evaluate them because none of them have been really validated to my satisfaction yet.
I see.
Good to know. Good to know.
And Suzanne?
Yeah, I think that's really important to test for those kind of things to be sure. Just, making sure that you're getting all the things that you need. I saw a really, really interesting podcast done with Dr. Kumbada where he was talking about that. And he said it had to do with maybe the genetics, if you live next to the ocean and all these other different things in your genetics. And that's what he thought it was about. But yeah, I also have done that test that Rich has done, and mine's a little bit low. So I'm adding the algae stuff to it.
Yeah. So again, you want to look at the test and validation. That's probably one of the most important, active questions out there. But let's be very clear. Cardiovascular disease, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, and most forms of cancer are not deficiency diseases, not a lack of DHA or not a lack of vitamin B12. These are conditions of dietary excess fat in general, excess protein in general, excess animal fat and protein in particular. So if you just get people to eat a vegan, SOS-free diet, you will eliminate a huge chunk of the problems that people have. Now, if you want to take those people that are on vegan, SOS-free diets and fine-tune their dietary issues to solve, individual variations, I got No fundamental problem with that. But we get distracted with the pills and the potions and the worries about theoretical deficiencies, and sometimes lose sight for the fact that the big issue is, are people eating a healthy diet? Are they exercising? Are they getting enough sleep? And if you get diet, sleep, and exercise down, there's not that much left to have to worry about. It ends up being a much easier problem to fine-tune whatever individual variations may show up.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So what amount of exercise do you recommend, Dr. Goldhamer?
So, I think that, again, there's some individual variation in that, but people need to get enough exercise so the consequence of exercise is apparent. They're maintaining optimum weight, they're getting good quality sleep, they're maintaining flexibility, strength, and endurance. And so the fact is, you should have enough exercise in enough different areas to maintain, your strength, your flexibility, as well as your endurance to carry out normal activities. And I can tell you that the vast majority of people are not meeting those minimum requirements. It'll take people between 20 and 60 minutes a day of focused activity, depending on how vigorous it is. Some people are doing walking, so you might need to do a little bit more of lower intensity. Some people are doing stationary bikes, and they're doing stationary.
You're talking about the people that do those power bikes, yeah.
Yeah, all the various different types of low impact aerobic activity, very intense. You don't need to spend quite as much time doing it. But the point is, enough in order to maintain increasing aerobic capacity as well as strength and flexibility.
Yeah. I always tell my patients 3 to 5 hours a week is probably what they should be looking at, somewhere like that. Yeah.
And what are your thoughts about patient? But you go first.
I mean, for me, I probably don't practice what I preach. I preach telling people doing a variety of different activities. I happen to like to play basketball. So I'm playing full court basketball either 4 or 5 times a week. So I'm getting a lot of activity out there, but that's probably not the healthiest way to do it, in the sense that, if you do a variety of activities, you have less repetitive movement injuries, you have less chance for injury, not engaging in mock warfare, which is what basketball is. So, the point is, I agree, whether it's 5 hours or 10 hours, depending on, what you're doing and what your goals are.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about microplastics? We had Dr. Sunil Pai on probably a year ago. He was talking about the dangers of microplastics. Would fasting help eliminate some of that?
Well, I mean, that's a very good question. This is an area that research is just now being done about the increasing amount of plastics that are building up in people's bodies. Now, we've long advocated not using plastics particularly for cooking foods and heating things, and trying to avoid your exposure. But even if you're diligent, you're still going to get exposed nowadays, and they're thought to accumulate in the body. There's some debate about how to measure that and how significant it is clinically, and also about, is fasting an effective way of mobilizing and eliminating these materials. This is an area that we will be doing some active research. We haven't done it to date, so I can't speak authoritatively on how effective fasting is. What's interesting, though, is it seems to be effective at mobilizing and eliminating just about everything else. Yeah. And so I won't be surprised to find out that microplastics total body loads also drop post-fasting. But again, research still has to be done.
I'll definitely be looking for that research, because I'm really curious about it myself. Yes, Suzanne?
Yeah, it's just, and again, all these things are just the little minute, picky little details that people tend to get caught up in. Obviously the big picture is eat a whole food, plant-based diet, avoid salt, oil, and sugar, get enough exercise. What are your thoughts on how much sleep people should be getting?
Yeah. So I think sleep is one of our most important activities. And when you don't get enough sleep, it suppresses your immune system. It makes you vulnerable for death and debility. It's also responsible for much of the fatigue that people experience, because the quality and quantity of sleep are both critically important in order to be able to allow you to convert the ADP to ATP and have your mitochondria function, et cetera, et cetera. So you need to get enough sleep so you can awake spontaneously feeling refreshed. And for most people, that's going to be 7, sometimes 8 hours or more, depending on their state of health, their age, et cetera, and their stress level. You want to go to bed in a cool, dark, and quiet place to improve the quality of your sleep. And sleep uninterrupted. That's why don't eat 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed. Empty your bladders before you go to bed at night. Deal with the inflammatory conditions that cause people to wake up. For example, men often have a non-parasitic hypertrophy. They're waking many times at night. to pee, and the problem is it interferes with the quality of their sleep. So what we would do, for example, is fast to reduce the benign prostatic hypertrophy, start waking once a night instead of 6 or 10 times a night. And now all of a sudden their energy level starts coming up, their metabolic rate starts responding. They're more willing to put the energy into eating healthfully and being more active because they're no longer fatigued from the sleep deprivation, or their immune system's no longer suppressed from the immune deprivation. And so I think sleep is critically important. The way to control it is by going to bed at a consistent times and not eating 3 hours to 4 hours before you go to bed, and then making sure cool, dark, and quiet places presented so that you can wake spontaneously feeling refreshed. If you're waking up and using a highly addictive nervous system drug like most people are in the form of caffeine in order to be able to function, you're not getting the quality or quantity of sleep you need in order to maintain health and happiness. And so you need to stop it. And that's why we advocate avoiding all highly addictive drugs, including caffeine in its various forms.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's a big one. Yeah, I sleep with like 9 dogs, so I don't know if I get.
Yeah, my dog always sleeps. Yeah.
Well, if the dogs can't be trained to stay quiet at night, then they need to sleep in a different room, and you need to sleep where you can be in a cool, dark, quiet place.
Yeah. And my dog's a sleeper. He loves to sleep, so no worries about that.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my clients, in coaching, he has that problem where he wakes up frequently at night to urinate, and he actually finally got a prescription for that. I told him, I advised him not to eat late at night, and so far nothing is working. But
well, is he underweight or overweight?
He finally got to his ideal weight. He switched to a plant-based diet probably a year ago. So,
once you've identified that there's not, bladder inflammation in the kidney function is okay. I mean, the next thing is to try medically supervised water-only fasting. A lot of times that'll reboot both the gut microbiome as well as the whole general urinary system. And then the same healthy diet that he's eating then may allow him in order to be able to function better. But, I'd say sleep disruption is a common and highly treatable disturbance that, oftentimes, once people get treated, it has a cascading effect in benefiting the rest of their health.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I'll definitely suggest that to him, because he doesn't want to be dependent on meds, and I don't blame him, because it'd be much better to heal yourself.
One of the services we offer, which is a free service, which I think is really valuable, is that if people go onto our website at TrueNorthHealth.com and complete the registration forms, which gets us their medical history information, we offer a free phone conversation so that we can talk about, is fasting something that's appropriate, point them to a doctor perhaps in their area, or one of our telemedicine doctors that they can work with us, that can help them figure out how to fine-tune what they're doing in order to move in the right direction. Sometimes it's just really nice to have a doctor who's not an idiot, that's used to people getting well, and they can give specific advice about actions that people can take that maybe they weren't aware of. Sometimes there's more than diet and lifestyle advice alone. Sometimes there are also direct medical management advice that can be helpful. And so that's one of the services we have. Anybody that is interested can go to TrueNorthHealth.com, fill out the forms, get a free phone conversation, at least to see whether or not there's anything we know that might be of use.
Yeah, really,
I love that.
That's great.
That's so amazing.
Yeah, so in a way, I guess you help in all 50 states. It depends on.
Well, yeah, about 15% of our patients are foreign. We treat a lot of people from Australia and England. I just did a show with a guy named Stephen Bartlett, who's centered in England, and it's his show is The Diary of a CEO. And I did a show with him, and it's had, 3 million views. And so we've been getting a lot of people from England, and of course I train in Australia, so I have a lot of contacts in Australia. We get a lot of Australians coming for fasting.
That's awesome.
And obviously Canada and Mexico as well. There's not a lot of places that people can go and get medically supervised long-term water fasting. And so people that are very interested in that tend to know about or hear about TrueNorth Health Center.
Yeah.
Speaking of podcasts, I hear you were on Joe Rogan recently. I haven't checked it out.
I've not been on Joe Rogan yet. I'd like to be on Joe Rogan. I think we could have a really hearty debate about diet, because it turns out he's not an advocate of a whole plant food diet.
Because I heard you mention something about that Chef AJ. Maybe it was ritual.
Yeah, I think they were speculating that we might be able to have a heated discussion about diet, because that's an area that we apparently don't completely agree. So my goal would be to try to shift Mr. Rogan in a whole plant food direction. We'll see how successful I'm going to be with that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, I'd love to see a debate about that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I did a show with Rich Roll, though, who's a strong vegan advocate. And
that must be what she mentioned, yeah.
A large viewership. I think there's about 4.5 million people.
Yeah, she mentioned that.
Discussion we had. Yeah. And that was actually quite pleasant because Rich Roll is very interesting. He is unusual in that he actually reads the book and he really is in-depth knowledge and turns out to be a strong advocate for healthy eating and living. So I was really impressed with his, the depth of his research and knowledge.
Yeah, that's great. I also have a question about organic versus conventional vegetables. Especially since I'm on the East Coast, we can't really, pick vegetables in the winter, and we have to rely on the stores. And I try to buy organic when it's, especially the dirty dozen. Especially like strawberries or something like that. But what are your thoughts on conventionally grown vegetables?
Well, I think you always try to order organic vegetables when they're available. And in California where we are, it's great because we can grow everything all year round. It's easy.
Right.
But when you can't get fresh organic vegetables, you get the best fresh vegetables that are available to you. And and again, like you said, there are some vegetables and fruits that are particularly higher concentration of pesticides. So I wouldn't want to be buying maybe commercial strawberries. That may not be a plant that I would want to. I would wait till seasonal availability. But there are many things, like for example, watermelon, where the concentration is going to be relatively low. You're not eating a thick skin, and so it wouldn't be quite as critical to a contamination issue. So you buy the best organic stuff you can get. You buy the best commercial stuff that you can get. And then you also can use the freezer, and you can use drying, and you use freeze drying. There's lots of ways. Or probably the best, most helpful suggestion is to move from the East Coast to the West Coast and come live with us in California, where we can grow our own strawberries and pick them in as late as December. So, I think all the health conscious people should do what we did, which was look around, figure out where the best place to live is. It turns out to be Northern California in the Santa Rosa area where the TrueNorth Health Center is located.
Very true.
And just come join us. And I got news for you. I have probably several hundred people over the years that have, in fact, done just exactly that.
But one thing I do grow around here year-round is sprouts. I love sprouts.
Oh, yeah.
Doug Evans, you're friends with Doug Evans, correct?
Oh, yeah. Doug I've known each other for decades.
Yeah.
And I am a strong advocate of sprouts. Sprouts you can grow organic all year round. In fact, I think he has a new device coming out that's going to make growing sprouts for people even easier. He's been working on a new sprouting device. So
that's exciting.
Yeah, I imagine that'll be fabulous. But in the meantime, you've got a screen and jars, and you can grow all kinds of different sprouts. In fact, interestingly enough, when I was in chiropractic college, I put myself through chiropractic college with a company called Perfect Sprouts. And what we did was we grew sprouts commercially. We did about 2,000 pounds a day. We delivered to restaurants and grocery stores. And then ultimately we sold that business and used the money as the seed money for the TrueNorth Health Center. So you might say that sprouts really put us in business. So I've been a strong advocate of sprouts for since I was 16 years old.
Wow.
When you think about the highly concentrated glucoraphanin, and I'm trying to say that name correct, Doug Evans sells the seed that's concentrated in that, and I've tried it. It tastes the same as the regular broccoli sprouts, but do you think a high concentration is beneficial, or is it?
Well, I think that all sprouts are superfoods. And so, and again, I don't see lack of nutrient concentration as really much of a limiting factor for most people. But so I think whatever's organically grown sprouts, seeds that you're able to get that have high germination rates are going to do really fabulously well. And particularly some things like broccoli sprouts are just particularly nutritious and tend to not have some of the problems that alfalfa or other sprouts have been associated with. So, I really think you can do well. I particularly like sunflower sprout greens.
Oh, I just started doing those, yeah.
Yeah, these are, I think, some of the most nutritious and delicious sprouts. And we use those very routinely and regularly and with great enjoyment.
You know what I can't seem to grow? I just tried it the other week, just to see if it would work was pumpkin sprouts. I didn't get anything out of the seeds.
You have to have the right kind of whole raw pumpkin seeds that have high germination rates. And so a lot of the seeds that you're getting have been pasteurized, and so they're not going to sprout because they've been heat treated. And so, it's just like they pasteurize almonds and stuff. So you have to actually get, sproutable seed in order to be able to grow sprouts. It's just like potatoes. If you buy potatoes at a grocery store that are not organic potatoes, they've been processed in a way they're not going to sprout. So they'll last a long time on the shelf, but they're not going to make you new plants. But organically grown potatoes, of course, will begin sprouting, and then you can plant them and grow them.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Because I bought an organic bag of pumpkin seeds. But I always buy them organic and raw, but probably they're still pasteurized.
But they're still probably been treated. So I'd be careful about that. Try not to. I wouldn't use those as for sprouting.
Yeah.
Good to know. We do ask all of our guests the same question. What do you eat in a day, Dr. Goldhamer? We'd really like to know.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I've just been looking at that I've been part of a validation study that they're using to look at adherence with diet. So I'm pretty acutely aware of exactly what I'm eating. Fortunately, it's pretty easy to measure because I eat a very similar routine depending on the season, but oftentimes have oats or some other grain like corn in the morning, along with fresh fruit and greens, so celery, cucumbers, sprouts, perhaps up to an ounce of raw nuts or seeds. And then large vegetable salads at lunch and dinner, large platters of steamed vegetables, particularly, broccoli, cauliflower, chard, kale, corn, and then some type of potatoes, rice, or beans in order to meet caloric density. So what this ends up being about is 15 to 18% of calories from fat, most exclusively from whole foods, so nuts, seeds, avocado, about 10% of calories from protein, and the balance from whole plant food carbohydrates. I don't like to talk about plant-based because that really doesn't mean anything, but exclusively whole plant food diet is a diet derived from whole plant foods. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the diet that served me well. I'm 66 years old right now, so a little bit over 50 years on a vegan SOS-free diet. So far, it seems to be working well. So I'm gonna try it for another 50 years and then reevaluate.
I think that's a great idea.
But do you know the work of Mike Young? He wants to live to be 150. He wrote a book about it. He said,
"Yeah, probably that's not going to happen. We know there's 8.2 billion people on the planet today. There's been 109 billion born since modern humans have been around. There have been 5 people that have lived past 117, all women." And no males have lived past 117. Oldest is 124. So it's pretty unlikely that somebody's claims for 150 are, be unlikely to fruition. There'd be a much better chance that they would live somewhat less than 117, regardless of their diet and lifestyle habits. Okay. How long you live is largely determined by genetics and luck. How well you live is largely determined by your diet and lifestyle. Mm-hmm. The average person spends 16 years debilitated in a downward trend. If you want the last 20 years of your life to be the best 20 years instead of the worst 20 years, that's where diet and lifestyle come in. It's avoiding debility. It's not living forever. You're not going to live forever. Everybody you know is going to be dead within 600 months from now. It's just a question of whether or not they're going to live fully functional or find themselves unable to talk or move, lying in some nursing home bed waiting for people to change their diapers because they've had a stroke or heart attack or developed premature cancer before their time.
It's true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I want to avoid. Yeah. That's why I do what I do. I don't want to end up like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the best chance of having the last 20 years being highly functional would be adopting a whole plant food SOS-free diet, get regular, appropriate exercise, get bountiful sleep, and don't take crap from anybody. I'd suggest also avoid watching too much news or things like that.
I think you have a great idea there. Yes.
I believe stress is like Christmas. Yeah, I think stress is like Christmas. It's better to give than receive. So I always try to be generous.
Yep.
Oh my God. I love that.
Yep. Well, Dr. Goldhamer, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this interview. And you've learned a lot. If people are interested in getting a summary of all the work we've done, the 20 papers we've published in the peer-reviewed literature, they're freely available on our website, or they can get our new book called Can Fasting Save Your Life, which summarizes all the work
And it's written in a way to convince not only the individual that fasting might have utility, but their doctor as well. So it has all the referencing and all the information necessary so a doctor can help a patient go through fasting safely.
Yes.
Awesome. I know I'm going to get my copy. All right. Yeah. Thank you both, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.